This video will cover the Geometry Common Core exam, question 34. Number 34 says, in the diagram below, the line of sight from the park ranger station P for park ranger, to the lifeguard chair L on the beach of a lake is perpendicular to the path joining the campground C in the first aid station F. So you can see that each of these letters are representing the title of the location. F, first aid, C, campground, L, lake, and P, park ranger. The campground is 0.25 miles from the lifeguard chair. So here C is 0.25 from L, the lifeguard chair. The straight paths from both the campground and the first aid station to the park ranger station are perpendicular. Remember that perpendicular lines always form right angles. So it looks as though we have a right angle down here at L and a right angle here at P. The first question says, if the path from the park ranger station to the campground is 0.55 miles, so from P to C is 0.55, determine and state to the nearest hundredth of a mile the distance between the park ranger, P, and the lifeguard, L. So my goal is to figure out this distance from P to L. I'm going to resketch this triangle that I see here because I think it's important that we recognize the triangle and its parts so that we can figure out what formula to use. P, L, C, where PC is 0.55, LC is 0.25, and we just called PL X. So here when I'm looking at this problem, I have three sides and a right triangle. In order to find the third or the missing side of this right triangle, I can use a formula called the Pythagorean theorem. And that formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are legs and c is the hypotenuse. So looking back at this triangle, hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. So 0.55 will be plugged in as C. Then the 0.25 and the x represent my A and B because they are legs. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug into my equation. I have x squared plus 0.25 squared equals 0.55 squared. So now I have x squared plus, when I plug in 0.25 squared to the calculator, I get 0.0625 equals, when I plug in this right side into the calculator, I get 0.3025. Now our goal here is to solve for x squared. So I need to move this 0.0625 to the other side. And I'm going to do that by subtraction. So when we do the subtraction in our calculator, we end up with x squared equals 0.24. Now in order to get x by itself, I need to square root both sides. I need to undo squaring. So now I end up with x equals 0.48989, and then it keeps going, dot, dot, dot. But it's asking me to round to the nearest nearest hundredth of a mile. Hundredths place is the 8, so I need to look to the right. And it then tells me to round the 8 up. So 0.49 is our final answer here. The second question says that Gerald believes the distance from the first aid station to the campground is at least 1.5 miles. So from F to L, Gerald thinks that it's supposed to be 1.5 miles. The question is Gerald correct? Justify your answer. So I'm going to take a second just to resketch the picture down below so I don't have to keep scrolling up and down. But once we resketch and we label all important information, I think we can be able, or we are able to figure out how to prove that Gerald is either correct or incorrect. So again, PC is 0.55, LC is 0.25. We found out that PL is 0.49. And then because we're looking for the distance from the first aid station to the campground, that's F to C. So I'm going to choose to call that X. When we have pictures like this, we're allowed to think of three formulas, where we have HAL, HA equals LL, A squared equals SS, I'll let you figure out what that one spells, and L squared equals SH. Now it's important to remember what each of these letters mean. H is for hypotenuse. A is for altitude. Altitude is always the line that's drawn from a vertex perpendicular to the opposite side. S stands for segment. And L stands for leg. We always focus on the big right triangle. Focus on big triangle. And again, it's the right triangle that we're focused on. So if I have this right triangle where P is the right angle, this is the big right triangle, I'm going to take a second to label the pieces of information that I have or what I'm looking for. Always across from the right angle we have the hypotenuse. So H is the X. Making up the right angle we have a leg. So PC, the 0.55, is an L. Then here it looks as though I have a segment because it's just a portion of the hypotenuse, a part of the hypotenuse. So based on this information, I have an L, an S, and an H, which means that I'm going to use leash. L squared equals SH. So I'm going to just plug in, I have L squared equals SH. Remember, L is 0.55 squared equals the segment 0.25 times the hypotenuse, X. So plugging into the calculator, 0.55 squared, as we know from the previous problem, is 0.3025. And again, still equal to 0.25x. Our goal here is to solve for x, so I'm going to divide by 0.25. Whatever you do to one side, don't forget to do to the other. So now x is equal to 1.21. Now it's great that we found an answer for this value, but remember we're asked if Gerald is correct about his conclusion that we are at least 1.5 miles between the first aid station and the campground. So we actually have to say yes or no. If you find 1.21 and you leave the answer like that, you're only getting partial credit. So because 1.21 is less than 1.5, we are going to say that no, Gerald is not correct. Because the distance is only 1.21 miles. So again, once you find your answer, 1.21, you do have to state no as your final decision.